So here is where you sell your coral from, right? These are all the pieces that you say are online.
That's right.
Which of course I'll put a link to on this video below. I mean, just seeing these in person, man, I can tell you that these are very, very good looking, healthy corals. And I mean, I've bought plenty of stuff from you, and to this day, it's still in my tank, still doing very well. So definitely recommended. But let's get back on the subject of the light. Over there, you mentioned, and I'm really bad with names, but what is the light?
Those are the Ocean Revive, okay. Right? T247Bs. But Ocean Revive has been purchased now by Arc Reef Keeping down in Florida. And they have renamed them as the, I think, Marine Life T247Bs, which are basically the same Ocean Revive clusters. It's a panel type light. With all Cree LEDs inside of it.
Which is funny though, because you notice that a lot of lights of the major like Ecotech and now the Sky and all that, they're going back to that panel light, light setting.
Oh yeah.
And it's some lights have already been doing that for quite some time. Yeah.
Yep.
So what do we have here?
So these are the Noopsyche K7 II Pros, and since this room was built, we tested over each tank pretty much all different types of lights. We had halides, T5s, a multitude of different types of lighting. And pretty much when you put them side by side, they grew everything just as well as the most expensive light. And at the time, I think these were maybe 150 bucks, I think, per fixture. So when compared to the cost of perhaps buying Radions or Kessels or something like that, it was much easier to outfit this entire shop area here with just these lights, and that's exactly what we did. The lights had proven themselves to us, able to grow everything from LPS and hammers, torches galore, hammers, everything was growing perfectly under these lights. And we decided, you know what, there's no reason for us to really even consider any other fixture. These are just doing a job. And in 4 years, not a single one has failed.
4 years already?
4 years, and there's 25, I think I have 35 of these total.
Are these different generations, just a different color?
Nope, just different colors.
Different colors.
Just different colors. I'm kind of OCD, so all the ones on the outside are black. The ones here in the middle are all white, just because they're all matching up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, as a matter of fact, not with that one, but I noticed that with this one is a black bar with the whites, and then blacks with the white bar.
Yeah, it was kind of like OCD. My kids decorated this room with all the stickers and the fish and the.
It looks really good.
The little
jellyfish.
The jellyfish that glow from the ambient lights of the blues. They said they wanted to be under the ocean, so I bought them a bunch of stickers and said, all right, go ahead. Start sticking them everywhere.
Do they spend time in here with you sometimes?
Yes. The smallest one is my little buddy. He's my holder. He holds things for me. So hold this hose, hold this pipe, grab this, grab that. And he just has a ball down here. He has his own favorite fish. His favorite fish in here is clownfish. She's about 12 years old. Her name is Coco, right?
Coco.
It's a Clarkie. She's outlived 4 husbands. But that's his favorite fish, right? Coco is his favorite fish. So he'll come in here. He feeds her. My kids overall are pretty much involved with this. They've come to some shows with us just to hang out. They really like this stuff. My wife is heavily involved. She started off as most reef wives do, just kind of like, oh, that one's pretty, and then she learned the name, and then. When things started going crazy here, she got involved with the business side of it and helping to pack orders, helping with maintenance, and now she can pretty much name everything in here. She knows what the parameters are. She can rattle off just about whatever you need as far as types and corals and care requirements. But she's also one of the reasons in here is so neat. Being super neat is another one of her most amazing traits, other than being an awesome reef wife. She's very neat, and she has a better eye for color than I do. So when I ask her about where should I put this, or how should I put this, or does this color look right, she gives her input in that type of a scenario. So it makes things a whole lot easier. But
That is awesome.
if we're talking about lighting, like I said, mentioned before, lighting here is not an issue. Here we control the par by height. So pretty much all of the lights on the outside skirts here are all running the same pars. Right in the middle, we're going to be right around 100 to about a 110. And on the sides are going to be about 75 to 80 or so in the far corners. And we place corals based off of that spectrum. So like the power end cores and stuff, we'll stick them over here in the right hand side where it falls down there. These are multi-clustered LEDs, which are nice because I can control up to 32 of them on one controller, 16 per channel, which is great because I control all of the outside ones here on one parameter and this one's here on another controller.
And I'm assuming it's because on the outside it looks like you mainly have LPS.
Correct.
And then on this inside tank you have mainly
Sticks.
SPS. Yeah.
Yep, sticks. So this is where we stick all of the sticks for grow out. We try to get them all to be right around here where they're encrusting before we say, all right, they're ready to go.
Man, I can't help, you know, while we're filming this, I can't help but already start. My wife is giving me a look over there, like I'm already.
And you don't even have glasses on yet. That's gonna make things worse when you put on the glasses.
Like I'm like, yeah, that one. I'm amazed. You have an amazing, you know, setup here.
I always tell people, whoever your dealer is, right? You know, if drugs are, if corals are your drug, right? Whoever your dealer is, you know, make sure in this case that they are getting high on their own supply, all right? That they are taking care of their tanks the same way they're telling you to take care of their tanks. There's a lot of really great advice out there. I got all of my start for reefing advice through, you know, places like Reef to Reef and Reef Central. And that's where I learned things. And it took me years to wade through all of the good advice and the bad advice. And the one thing I used to tell people all the time, when you go to a spot or go to a store, see what's visible and see what's hidden, right? Now, here it's a very simple setup, right? All my sumps are exposed. There's nothing special going on to keep these corals healthy. It's very easy. It's easy because when someone asks me, hey, how do I set up my sump? Do I have to go buy a $400 sump? No, a 40 breeder for 50 bucks from Petco, a skimmer and a filter sock holder with some PVC pipe, and you'll be ready to rock and roll. And you too can have this. It's not about keeping secrets. You know, a lot of people are afraid to give away trade secrets. You know, there's a reason that my Euphilia looks that great. And it's probably not one that you're gonna hear very often, but there are medications out there that will make your Euphilia look fantastic all the time, pretty much, because you can run it through your system. It's very relatively safe. I wouldn't say it's the only thing in the world. Good health, water clarity, and water quality is paramount, but for keeping things like bacterial infections down, where it's like in an environment like this where it's close to each other and there's a lot of different types, I really love Cipro. You know, Cipro is a fantastic product. I use it very often. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but you know, running it through my systems as part of my monthly maintenance is something that I do a lot of. And I think that more people should know that it does work. It works on a commercial scale. It can work on a hobbyist scale as well. Just keeping people plugged in to what keeps their stuff alive, I think, is really important. And just showing people that you don't need rockstar equipment. Equipment is not it. You just need
People have been doing it for so long.
Yeah,
without
you just gotta put the time in.
Newest, you know, stuff that's come out in the market now. Like people will tell you, you know, they've watched this alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium, and that's it. And they've been doing it for so long without the fancy Bubble King skimmer. Instead, they use ice cap one or something like that.
It was like a 12-year-old Diablo skimmer. It's probably on his last leg, but it works.
Yeah.
It pulls out the gunk. People say, "Oh, what kind of food do you feed your corals?" Because that's another big one, like parameters and supplements. Yeah, fish poop. Fish poop. That's what I feed them. A lot of fish poop. A lot of fish poop and a lot of food. But when I do want to buffer it, do I have a specific product that I like using? Yes, all of them. All of them. So like people say, what's your coral food? All the coral foods.
Mix it all in one.
Every single coral food that I can get my hands on, new, trial, experimental, they're all mixed up right here.
Wow. You know, that's a good idea right there.
That's it, because...
I'm going to tell you something. I do the same thing too.
Yep.
I have every kind of coral food there is, but I don't have it in a bucket like that, but you gave me an idea now. I just, you know, grab a teaspoon of one and a teaspoon of another one, mix it all in one thing, put phytoplankton in there, and then just dump it into the tank.
Yep. Coral food, 2 tablespoons, 1,000 mils of Red Sea AD+. Mix it all together, add water, and feed. I don't feed very many meaty things though. I always feel like if meaty type foods for things like euphyllia, they don't really work well. So I tend to always stick to the powders, right? So powdered food is where I'm at. Powdered food is, I broadcast feed, I'll target feed some things. You know, I'll mix a pasty for the NEMs. But for everybody else, I pretty much just broadcast feed, turn off the flow, let it rip. I don't use filter socks, so whatever goes down there, whatever doesn't get sucked out by the skimmer, makes its way back in the tank.
How often?
Things here. Every other day.
Every other day.
I tell people all the time, keep what you know is going to match your lifestyle. Don't buy an expensive coral that's going to require you to test every week. If you don't like to test, then don't get SPS. Stick to softies and LPS, which are very forgiving as far as I'm concerned with tank parameters, right? But the more that you get into something that's, you know, a little bit tougher to keep, stuff that requires a little bit more due diligence on your part as far as testing and keeping parameters balanced, that's when you experiment with that stuff. But in here, I can lose 2 DKH in a day. So yeah, in order to keep my alkalinity up, I'm dosing every hour.
Every hour.
Every hour and an hour. 500
Automatic
mils
dosing?
every day. Yep.
Got it.
So, and because I go through so much, I had to switch from gallon containers to 5-gallon containers.
Yeah, so at the house, you know, I'm on the 2-liter containers. Wow.
Yep. So I'm dosing every hour. So that's the BRS, BRS pharmaceutical grade stuff.
Yeah.
I love it. I love their support. I love that it mixes clean.
And it's affordable.
Yep, it's super affordable, especially for me. I don't buy pouches. I buy 5-gallon buckets of the dry solutions. Oh, wow. Yeah, so we buy 5-gallon buckets of it about every 4 months. So one 5-gallon bucket lasts me about 4 months. And basically that's what we're dosing in here. I thought about a calcium reactor in here a lot of times, but we really can't because depending on the cycle that we're in for sales, this place is gonna get wiped out fast. So we run a sale, we're probably gonna move 300-400 pieces during a sale. We're talking about eliminating that tank, most of this tank, probably half of this. That's about 400 or 500 pieces. And that really drops the consumption down. And if I'm using a calcium reactor to keep that going, that could possibly, you know, kind of throw my parameters out of whack. So what I thought about was perhaps now introducing a calcium reactor here and keeping it at a low baseline, say 6 or 7 DKH. And then as it drops down, look and see how much it rises up versus, you know, where it's at right now.
I've known people that use both, right? They'll use a calcium reactor and then they'll also dose as well to kind of let that be the control the dosing part, and then the calcium reactor is just, you know, there for support in a way so that you're not having to use so much dosing. But I don't have a calcium reactor. I have wanted to get one. They seem complicated.
No.
Have you ever owned one?
Yeah, I actually have one with my 350 runs on a calcium reactor, right? They're actually super easy. They just look hard when you first set them up, right? And you have a pump that feeds the calcium reactor. You have another type of like a doser or something like that that will
dose the liquid.
Dose the CO2 in there, like some sort of a regulator that's gonna say how much CO2
doser or something like that.
So what I tell people when they're setting up a calcium reactor for the first time is turn it on, start the regulator, get that to right around 6.5, whatever your media is telling you to do, and then just slowly let the effluent into the system. Let it into the system and just start tracking your alkalinity, your calcium, and your magnesium levels. And when you see that it's holding, that's when you stop tweaking. That's when you just let it go at that point. But even with a calcium reactor, I've known more people to run into troubles because of drift. So I'm running a calcium reactor in the 350, and when you guys see that, you're going to see why dosing alone is not helping me with that. But drift happened to me the first time, which is where my stuff grew, and as they grew, they consumed more, and because I wasn't testing, you know, I just left the testing alone. I was like, well, I know what it's at. You know, because I did this test with the calcium reactor, and I know it's supposed to be at 8.5, but that drift had me down at almost 6.5. Everything looked fine because that drift happened so slow that nothing was happening. But going back up was almost like a 2-month process.
Wow.
Yep. The minute I tried to jump up half a point, you know, a point over 2 or 3 days, started seeing a little bit of RTN. So just now, it was just like, you know, it's 0.2 over, you know, over a few days to get it up to where it needs to go to.
So you have automatic testing, you use a Trident for that. How often do you actually manually test?
Every week.
Every week?
Every week is a manual test in here. As a matter of fact, it's on a rotation. And if somebody skips their rotation, they clean all the tanks for a week. So the testing is super duper important. Retail is probably 150K in here. So when you're dealing with that type of cash, that type of an investment, testing should be the least of your worries, especially for something that's going to take you 15, 20 minutes. You work at a fish store, you should be able to knock it out in a couple of minutes, you know. Hell, while your countdown is running for your nitrate on your Hannah, do your phosphate. That's going to take 3 minutes, and while that's going, you know, pop out your calcium and knock that out. I mean, you could do all the testing.
Once you get into a routine, you should be able to do it.
It knocks it out. Yeah. But you got to test, and it's something I stress to my customers. It's actually the first thing that we give to customers when we do a build for them, a set of test kit. An absolute set of test kits. We give them a test kit and a book, a journal. Where they write down all of their parameters.
Yeah, definitely very important. I learned the hard way when I first started reefing. And then it also depends, I guess, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, but, you know, depends on the kind of corals you have. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to, like you said earlier, if you want an SPS tank, you can't be lazy about it. You have to test. And sometimes the recommendation is at least once a week. But I feel you said it right here. In one day, you go down 2 DKH. So you can't wait a whole week to test. You know, it's sometimes a daily thing. But yeah, it's very important, definitely.
So I tell people all the time, and it's actually something funny, is that I'm available. I answer questions for people all the time, whether they're a customer or not. However they reach out to me, Facebook, whatever, I'll answer your question. I don't care if you bought from me or not. And the funny thing is that all of my customers, especially my regulars, know that I will not answer your question if you do not have a full set of tests available for me when you call.
So it's like the post that I see on Facebook sometimes. Hey, this is what's happening to my tank, but yet they can't answer the testing question. Exactly. Well, where's everything at? How are we supposed to know? You know what's, I get it.
I mean, I can give you some guesses, but I would hate for you to make decisions on those guesses without having a full set of tests. So now when a customer calls me up or sends me a text message and say, hey, you know, my XYZ is not looking so good, following that message is a readout, pretty much of this is where I'm running at, I tested this day. And then I said, okay, thank you. That's really great. You know.
So we've talked about DKH, we've talked about calcium, we've talked about magnesium. One of the topics that I've seen a lot lately, pH. So first of all, what do you keep your pH at, and what is your opinion on whether 7.8 is good versus 8.4, and is it worth? What I'm seeing now, it's people want their pH higher. You know, and they're doing everything they can to try to get that pH to above 8.2.
So I keep my pH at whatever level my system settles out to without me having to buy something.
Without having to do it, mess with it,
right. So in here, it typically runs around 8 to 8.1. Inside the house, it typically runs around 7.9, 8.1, 8.2, depending on how many people or if we have any windows open. I mean, I kalkwasser dose inside of the house there, mostly for other benefits, not necessarily just pH, but mostly to counteract my the pH drop from the calcium reactor. Is why I kalkwasser dose under 350. But if I were just using kalkwasser, my pH would be super high. So here's the thing: if you have 5 people living in your home, and if you're there by yourself and your pH is 8.4, but then when everybody comes home and starts mouth breathing, it goes down to 7.9. What are you gonna do? Go murder the other 4 people? That's not realistic, right? You can drill a hole outside, yes, run your airline tubing out there. Make sure you upsize that airline tubing when you drill it outside. 1/4 inch isn't gonna do much for you. It's just gonna make your skimmer work really, really hard to suck more air in.
So I know I had 6 people, or have 6 people in the house. And at the time where I was struggling with pH, I had 4 dogs and other pets around the house. I mean, I feel like the CO2 was just very, very high. I realized that it was a CO2 issue by, during, I think it was fall season, open the windows, and leaving the windows open for like 12 hours, it went up from like 7.6, 7.7 to like 8.0. Mm-hmm. At that point, I knew it. So what I use now is a CO2 scrubber.
Yep.
And that, to me, it helps, but it's expensive.
Absolutely.
It's expensive because the media doesn't last, especially on a 300-gallon tank.
Yep.
I've seen benefits with a higher pH, but I've also haven't seen like anything go wrong with corals if it stays at 7.8, 7.9 either. You know what I mean? Like there's no, to me, it's not bad to keep your corals at 7.8, 7.9. Corals still look good. The only thing that I've seen is higher usage of DKH when your pH is higher because it looks, I'm assuming they're growing
a little bit faster.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that there's something bad with higher pH. I mean, I think it's really great if you can either engineer your system or whatever to get a higher pH, without having to work too hard for it. And I'm not against anyone who uses a system like yours, CO2 scrubber, to boost that pH. I mean, it's only helping. You're doing your due diligence as a reefer to try and provide the best environment for your corals. That's not a bad thing. Where I think people kind of obsess about it is that they come up with a lot of really complicated ways and it becomes unapproachable. It becomes a maintenance nightmare. I mean, if you're having to change your CO2 media this often just to keep your pH up, what happens if you go away for a week? What happens if you have a party or 2 weeks, and you're not able to do that? I mean, the typical reef watcher will come in there and say, hey, these are prepackaged pieces of food. Just throw them in the tank and make sure no one's dead and there's no water on the floor, and then just leave, touch nothing else. Everything else will run automatically by itself. That's all I need you to do is to check, make sure nobody's dead and there's nothing on the floor. That's the typical person, but tell someone, oh, shut off this valve, remove this canister, use this thing to break it, to unscrew it, refill it to this line with this media that you're gonna find in a bucket over there.
Disaster.
And then hook up back all the thingies again. That's disaster. That's too much for asking anyone.
Right,
you know what I
mean?
Yeah. You could probably get slick with it. Just have a spare in line or something, turn a knob or something, but
I definitely would not do extra, right?
Yeah.
I think CO2 scrubber and maybe even a kalkwasser, but because of being a 300-gallon, I already use a lot of 2-part media, so I'm trying to like counteract that. Not so much for pH, but more for having 2 devices being a kalkwasser so cheap. But I've seen, other people where they'll do CO2 scrubber, they'll do air line going to the outside, they'll do kalkwasser. I mean, they do multiple things to try to raise their pH, and I'm like, wow, is it that important?
Too
like,
much. I just
feel like sometimes if you're like at 7.5, 7.4, I get it, but I've seen people stress on 7.8, and you're good at 7.8, right?
Not me. One of the things that we do during shows is pro tip during a show. You go from an environment with about 40 or 50 people to an environment with about 800 people hanging around going through the show. That's a lot of mouth breathing.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people breathing. And what we used to notice is that, a lot of vendors' tanks got cloudy, a lot of coral started wilting up. Excuse me. That's not your tank parameters. That's CO2. That pH in those tanks have dropped to astoundingly low levels. So what we do now is that we super buffer our water before and throughout the show, depending on what our pH tester is saying, we'll add alkalinity throughout the show. We'll add kalkwasser, saturated calc throughout the show, just to keep that pH up, try to counteract what the visitors are doing at that event.
Yeah.
2-day shows, we always do almost 100% water change just to reflush the system with brand new water with high pH inside of it. So pH is important for sure. In a home environment, I think you need to engineer what works for you and the family, which works for the people.
Considering everything that you just mentioned, like if you're going to go on vacation and, whatever the case may be, to where, I guess in my opinion, just not make it so complicated to where it's a failure point, right?
Exactly. I mean, I look at my 350 and it's full-blown SPS, and I'm like, you're cute today. You might just RTN and die tomorrow, right? That's cool. And that's the thing, you become desensitized to this stuff over time.
Yeah.
Things die. That's a tough one to explain to people all the time. Back, before, if a torch died, I would be buying $200 worth of stuff to fix torches or fix my system. Whatever I thought was broken, that's what I would be doing. Now, if I stick RTNs, what am I gonna do? I'm not gonna destroy the system trying to find a smoking gun. Sometimes they live, sometimes they don't.
But I understand that, right? But what if it's that one holy grail piece that just costs you $700 for the frag? I think at that point, you may worry. But like you said, I don't think you need to worry if everything else is doing good. I don't know what you would blame it on for that one piece, but yeah, absolutely agree. It's just, I tend to worry when it's that one holy grail piece that costs so much. And now I'm like, what I do though, and I don't know if this is, I'm assuming you do with your healing tank over there, is if you do have a QT or healing tank or whatever you may call it, that's where you figure out what's working for that coral before you put it in your display tank. Like fish, like when they say, QT your fish, get them to eat in that quarantine where there's no competition and blah, 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 blah.
And that's what we do here. We don't sell any completely wild fish that are just fresh off the boat, right? We only sell quarantine fish.
So you sell fish too?
Only quarantine fish. Actually, we bring our fishes in batches, right? 14-day and 30-day batches. So tangs are typically 14 to 30 days. Other fish, wrasses and stuff like that are typically about 14 days. And we run them through an entire quarantine from beginning to end.
What's your quarantine process?
So our quarantine process is when a fish first comes in here, we pH match and we pH match them to the water wherever they came from. We immediately move them from their shipping water into water that's matched to that parameters, but without all of that really high ammonia and all of that stuff that starts producing there. What we do then is we run them through rally for an entire hour. So an hour of rally.
A bath.
Rally bath, exactly. After that rally bath, they go into a system that has already been copper has already been in there. Copper safe is what we use. So that system is already at about 1.02 ish or so of copper is already in there when they go in. So the first time they're going into the tank, they're going right into copper, and then we wait. So it's almost about 24 to 48 hours. We'll wait just to see how they adapt, how they ship, how they're looking, and after that, we'll raise that copper level up right to the right amount, right, for copper safe. We'll leave it there for 7 days. 7 days of copper is where they're going to go through, whether they have a disease or not. After that point, we will do a big water change and we will redose for another 7 days with copper. They run through that copper treatment 14 days total, beginning to end. If at any time they have a disease during that time frame, we go ahead and we isolate them. And we either raise the copper level or we remove the copper from the system completely and we try a different path to it, right? If whatever they have wasn't affected by the copper to our satisfaction, we'll try with something else. Chloroquine, phosphate, nitrofuran, whatever, methylene. We'll try whatever it takes to see if that fish is going to make it through to get that disease off of them. After that 14 days of copper, it's 7 days of ProziPro. with a 100% water change after 48 hours, right, and a tank sterilization. So we dose them with ProziPro. 48 hours later, we do 100% water change, redose them back with ProziPro again for another 7 days. So
Awesome.
7 days of ProziPro. And then the final bit of all of that is that we typically run an antibacterial in the system until they're ready for sale. So about 30 days total.
And those fish that you sell, or do you ship them all across the United States? Okay.
No. So shipping fish for me, after I've spent about 30 days or so, right, getting this fish right. 30 days of time, money, investment. A person has just dropped, you know, $150 for a fully quarantined 30-day fish. I really feel like that's a place where local fish shops should excel. Right? There's a million places to buy fish online.
I completely agree.
Okay? There's a million places to buy fish online. However, you're taking the same risk an LFS is taking when they order a fish and get it shipped to them. And if you're spending that extra money already to get it quarantined, then you're taking even a higher risk because you're paying 2 or 3 times what retail the fish is to get it over to your place. I think that's where an LFS should shine. They should be able to provide, you know, quarantine fish that are healthy. And if someone wants to take the risk and do it themselves, then by all means, give it a try. Give it a try. Order it online. Take the same risks I do when I order a fish online, and give it a try. You know, see what you can do about it. But quarantine is not easy. People say it's easy, but it's not.
It definitely is. I've done it, and I could tell you that I will only do it with a select amount, like a specific species of fish, like tangs. I feel comfortable with. I've done some Anthias, but I know which ones work and which, at least for me, you know, which ones don't. So I didn't know you actually had quarantine fish. That's awesome to know. That's awesome.
Our locals pretty much tell us what fish they're looking for, whatever they want, and we'll order them in all in a big batch. We bring them all in. We quarantine them out. So our quarantine method works a little bit different here. So let's say if you want a Tomini tang, right? What I do is say you want a Tomini tang, whatever my price is, I actually order, depending on what my survival rate is with that fish, I'll order like maybe 5 of them. So it'll be 5 or 6. There's a reason there's an even number of tanks here. So there's 5 or 6 of them will come in at the same time. And out of those 6, whoever makes it through quarantine will dictate the final price, right? So I'll give you a ballpark number what the price is going to be. All 6 come in. You get to come and choose from the 6 which one you like. Whichever one likes you the best, I guess, like buying a puppy. And then you go there. But what sets us apart differently, especially for our local customers that buy our fish, is our guarantee. So we guarantee that our fish will not give your fish ick or any type of a disease. Or we will replace every single fish in your tank.
Really?
Yep. If our fish is proven to give your fish ick, we will replace every fish in your tank. Not only that, but we will come to you, drain your tank in one of our big 200 and something gallon tanks, right? Really fast drain, like a 1 horsepower pump, just to suck all that water out, catch all your fish, bring them back here in quarantine. Anybody dies, we replace them. At the end of the day, you get all your fish back quarantined for your entire fallow period, but we need to be able to prove that, right?
Yeah, that's what was going to be my next question, because anybody could say, hey, your fish gave my fish ick.
Exactly.
So how do you know that gentleman did not go and purchase fish from someone else
that brought the ick in?
That brought the ick in, or maybe even corals. You never know, you know.
So we actually,
because I've seen fish that are infected in at a local fish store, you know, where there's beautiful coral, and you see that fish that's, you know, has ick. I mean, it's obvious. It's wiped out. So how do you, like you said, how do you prove that?
So we actually have one of the first ever marine aquarium veterinarians that's been able to teach us how to gauge from the size of the ichthyostroph, how old it is, what stage of its life cycle it's in. So we have a chart, and that chart tells us how old the ick cycle is. So basically, if you bought a fish from me, I'm expecting you to show some signs of ick on your fish within about 7 days or so. And my fish would be the originator of it. So therefore, that trophont would be on my fish. So we would catch my fish, we would take a sample of it, we'd stick it under the microscope, a little compound microscope that we have over there, and measure the size. And the size of it will tell us how old it is. If the ick trophons in your fish are older than the ones that are on mine, my fish should give yours ick. It's the other way around.
Interesting way of doing that. You know, because I've always wondered how can you prove that? Right?
It's not that hard. I mean, it's just going the extra mile. But one of the things that we typically have to do in that type of a situation, it's a communication, right? I mean, we just don't quarantine fish for everybody, right? We don't quarantine anybody else's fish either. So you buy a fish from somewhere else and bring it here, we're not going to quarantine it. I just can't take that risk. I'm not going to add that fish into my systems. I don't know what that fish is bringing in. Yeah. But we'll teach you how to do it. Anyone who wants to learn how to quarantine your fish, what our process is, you stop by here. We'll run you through the entire process. You can take notes and try it at home.
Got it. And what about, you said you also would go through the whole par, you know, measure their par. Is that an option too? Like if someone buys a fish from you and says, hey, I don't want to quarantine here, I want to quarantine it at home, can you go to my house and show me how to set up a QT tank and so on and so forth?
Of course.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We'll come out there. We'll show you exactly what you need to do. I think
a lot of people would be willing probably to quarantine their own fish. They just have no idea how to start, what to do, you know, especially when it comes to copper. I know when I first started, the biggest thing for me was, how do I know what's too much and what's not too much, right? You know, of copper. And I know it says 5.0, but those tests that you rely on on the color changing,
Hannah has made that a lot easier.
And that's what I was gonna
Hannah
get to.
Copper Tester has made that a lot easier without having to guess.
Yeah.
But you know, actually, what the #1 killer for fishing quarantine is? It's lack of attention paid by the quarantiner. So you have a fish in quarantine. There's nothing there to see. It's a fish in medicated water looking half dead sometimes.
Yeah.
How often are you going over there and sitting down and staring at that fish? Not very often. You know you have it in quarantine. You know you have a time period that you need to look at it. So when fish are here in quarantine, they're getting looked at 4 to 6 times a day. They're getting a health assessment, basically, you know. They're getting that first feeding in the morning, seeing how they're looking. Are they eating? Are they not eating? All right, fine, we'll try a different food, you know, for the next feeding. So they're getting these health assessments throughout the day. And the minute a fish starts to look like if they're not taking to the treatment well, that's 100% water change. So how much water do you have on hand right now?
Me personally, I have a 300-gallon mixing station, but I don't think that's everybody.
Right. So the majority of people have maybe like a 55-gallon brute trash can.
Oh yeah, brute trash.
And half of the time they only fill it up when they're about to do a water change.
Yep.
So for us, we typically have around 300 gallons of water on hand, mixed already.
Ready to
during
do that water change without
hesitation.
Yep.
100% water change without hesitation.
Yep.
And that's the thing. Like, you're going to be doing lots of water changes. I think a really great source, plug Elliot. Marine
collectors.
Marine collectors. Really awesome series we're running on BRS right now, which really tells you exactly what you need to do with this quarantine. And that's true. Those water changes are necessary. You should be changing your water often as necessary during your quarantine. And let's just face it, if you're quarantining one tang, you might go through a bucket of salt to quarantine a tang. If you're doing in a 40-gallon, bucket has about 100. So it gets expensive.
It gets expensive, especially when you're first starting off and you don't know. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that I've struggled in the beginning of it when I wanted to do my own quarantine. And now I feel like I'm very comfortable and I know what to do. But there was a period where, and I can relate to a lot of beginners too, where you have that tank, the tank looks great, but one thing to keep in mind, there's no bacteria there to keep the ammonia levels down. And that's where the water change also comes through. It might not be an actual parasite that's killing the fish inside the QT tank. It's the ammonia that's building up and you don't see it. And if you're not testing for that too, then there's an issue.
The ammonia, the nitrite, the nitrates, all that stuff is building up in there. There's nothing in there,
Yeah.
So doing those water changes makes everything better. I'm pretty sure everybody who's watching right now has seen it. You do a water change in your tank, and it's just like, oh man, things are looking so good right now. Everything looks so clean. The corals are opened up, and that's what it is. I mean, kudos to those, no water change gang. If you guys are doing it and things are looking fantastical for you,
Why
props
change
to
it?
you.
Yeah, why change it if it's working?
Yeah, I can't do that. Myself and
beginner?
I'm a water change fanatic. I tell customers all the time when they first set up the system and they buy a tank from us, oh, I have algae, do a water change. Scrub it, get a toothbrush, go in there, scrub the algae, do a water change. Oh, you know, my sand doesn't look good, siphon the sand bed, do a water change. They're like, is everything going to be a water change? Yeah, for the first 6 months of your tank, it's going to be water changes.
Yeah, absolutely. For a beginner, it's setting up a first tank. There's just no way around it.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. So you said you've been up and running with TRSC for 5 years now, right? Mm-hmm. How long have you been a hobbyist for?
I've been a hobbyist for 15 years.
15 years.
Yep. I started like you, freshwater.
Okay.
You know, as a kid with my dad, I mean, I'm an avid fisherman. So keeping fish in the house is something that was really cool for us. I mean, I grew up next to a river. I lived in Antigua for, you know, close to 5 years. And just growing up around water and fishing and fish, you know, they're just really cool. So when we got here, my dad would take me to the store, and I would always be the only one to go with him to the store. And that's where I first ever saw yellow tang, was at a fish store. And back then, I mean, I'm talking, this is when I was like 10-ish or 11. Back then, a yellow tang was way out of reach. I mean, it was still probably like 30, 40 bucks. You know, but compare that to a goldfish or an Oscar, which was $10 or $12 at the time.
Even less, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we always had freshwater fish. And I'd always say, oh, can we have these? No, that's saltwater. That's too hard. That's too hard. I mean, these stores didn't even have corals in there because I don't even think keeping corals was possible back then. Yeah. So I used to always see that. So one of the first things I did when I got my first apartment was, and I met my wife, I was like, let's get a fish tank. Went to Petco, bought a 10-gallon fish tank, returned it. It was a 10-gallon starter set. Returned it, got a 20-gallon fish tank. I was like, oh, that's better. Yeah. You know, and I set up the whole thing like a saltwater tank. I had saltwater decorations. I had sand, and my idea was I can get peacock cichlids that kind of look like saltwater fish, and it would look nice. Fortunately, I couldn't find any peacock cichlids in New Jersey for some reason, right? Wow. So after a while, I got really sick and tired of it, and I started looking more and more into saltwater. I was going to these stores. I would see all of these saltwater setups, and I was just like, I would ask questions, you know, like, hey, how much would it cost to get into this? And it's like, oh, it's like $10 a pound for the live rock, and you need 1 pound per gallon. And these lights, these metal halide lights, are probably going to run you about $800. I mean, I'm a college student. I was making like,
it just completely
like $250 every 2 weeks, you know what I mean, on an on-campus job. So I was just like, I can't afford that. And that's when I discovered like a place, Reef Central, and they're used in sale forums, and those guys pointed me like, hey, you can go to Craigslist, and there's always people getting out and getting in. You might be able to find a used system on there. And that's what did it for me. I got on there, I found an entire setup for like $250, a corner bow front.
I remember, those used to be my favorite.
Yeah, corner bow front. I set that guy a 54-gallon corner bow front, set it up, and that corner bow front went from there to a 90, to a 180, to a 150, now to a 350, and 1,200 gallons in here now.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that. So in here, it's 1,200 gallons total?
Yeah, about 1,200 gallons.
Oh, wow. Wow. You sure feel the humidity. How do you control all that here?
So we have a dehumidifier that kicks on a sensor that tells us what's going on. The AC handles the rest of the humidity in here. It's typically only during the daytime that we have it, but it should be cool to mention that everything that you're looking at right now is solar powered.
Really?
The whole house is solar powered. I'm not using any electricity right now.
Man, that's definitely one of my goals one day, right? And not because I'm gonna set anything up like this, but it's just the fear of before they did something in my house, you know, with a line that they dug up and put a different gauge one, I guess. Before that, I would have at least 2 to 3 power outages a year, and they would last. A lot of times they would last less than an hour, less than 2 hours. But there was one time that it was like 12 hours or more, or something like that. And so I've always, maybe not solar power, but a whole home, you know, generator or something like that. Just as long as I don't turn on the AC or something like that, it can actually handle the whole house. But that's awesome, man. That, you know, not only are you, not only do you have a backup for if anything were to happen, you know, if other houses lose power, but you're in a way, you know, it's kind of like an electric car where you you're not using gas, right? You know,
Right.
so
Right.
you're
So one of our biggest pushes for the solar was how much was our electricity bill. So my electricity bill here without solar was around $650. Right. Now the business paid for it, so which was great.
of course.
But at the same time, it was still pretty high. You know, running the house plus here was pretty expensive. So when we got solar, my biggest thing was that I wanted to offset my power when it was at the highest, and it's obviously at its highest throughout the day, right? So from morning when these lights turn on and everything's ramping up, that's when the power is at its highest. So all my lights are running and stuff. So basically, when we designed our system cost us about $35K, spread out over 25 years, right? When we did it, it pretty much 100% offset us to where we're producing energy back to the grid right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So bright sunny day, great day outside. Yeah, we're gonna produce tons and tons of energy. You know, like 800 watts per panel, give or take. And we're gonna boatloads of energy back in there. And so then at nighttime, when the lights are going off, everything is turning down for the night, everybody's going to sleep, and it's just bare minimum DC pumps, maybe 100, 200 watts of DC pumps running here. But no 90 watt lights or 120 watt lights or anything like that. That's when we would use that accumulated energy throughout the day for the evening. So, I mean, occasionally during the winter time, we'll get a bill for maybe like $100 or $120 a month. That's because, you know, in the wintertime, less sun overall is produced. But it's still a far cry from, you know, $600 a month for electricity. And that's part of the reason why we're able to do this. You know, the business pays for it, they pay for the solar, and we're able to accomplish this without having so much be just about energy, you know, and it's one of the main things that we wanted to try and be here is as energy efficient as possible, and it kind of works. It kind of works for us here.
Awesome. Do you want to move over to the inside of your house where the home tanks are at?
Yep.